So I have owned the brand new MacBook Pro 14-inch for a week now. So today I've decided to do you guys my 1 week review of this brand new MacBook Pro. Hi guys, it's Matt here. So that's right, I've owned the 14-inch MacBook Pro now for a week, and to be honest, my life with it has been absolutely amazing. I have done so much bits and pieces on it over that time, and I want to share some of the things that I've been doing on this MacBook Pro and give you my overall impression after 1 week usage of using this MacBook Pro versus say the likes of the kind of previous generation, the 13-inch MacBook Pro like I have right here. Now, rightfully so, this MacBook Pro does actually replace a Intel higher spec 13-inch MacBook Pro, but I've only got a M1 13-inch MacBook Pro, so I'm going to be doing comparisons against that for this review. But first of all, let's talk about the design of this 14-inch MacBook Pro and some of the big changes what they have done to it. Now, the first thing you may notice with the design when you open up a MacBook Pro has got to be that notch at the top of the screen. You either love it, you hate it, or you don't really care. To be honest, I'm on the kind of fence of I don't really care and possibly a little bit of the hate it. And the main reason why I'd say I actually hate it is because what it's actually contained inside that notch. Now, with an iPhone, since the iPhone 10 sort of models, we've had that notch because we've had Face ID and we've had all those sort of bits and pieces, those sensors all inside that notch. So these are the things like the scanner on your face, like the laser which shoots out to check all those dots against your face. Also like the ambient sensor. Also there's like an infrared sensor if I'm correct. Also you've got the camera itself, and also you've got the speaker. So it's understandable why a notch exists there. But for the MacBook Pro, all what's housed inside that notch is a 1080p camera, and to be honest, as you can see here, it's not actually that big when you look closely. So why is there this massive notch in the top? Well, the only answer I can think of is this is kind of Apple's new design now. This is their thing. They're going to be putting notches in a lot of their models. They don't just want a single camera at the top. It does actually seem a bit quite unusual. But yeah, just the camera sits in that notch at the top. Now, there is workarounds with this notch, and to be honest, it doesn't really get in the way with a lot of apps that you open up. And like I said, you can get kind of third-party apps already out there what kind of make the bar at the top like what you used to get in a MacBook Pro and kind of squeeze down your resolution a fair bit, but you do lose that bit of space on that 14-inch display. So it's up to you if you want to keep it or not. But the next thing that we cannot ignore has got to be the screen. Now, the screen is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm not just saying that. This has got to be the best laptop screen I have ever seen in any product. And I'm not just talking about Apple's either, I'm talking about rival ones out there as well. I've also seen, some Samsungs do some great screens in some of their laptops or notebooks, but I've got to admit, this one is absolutely amazing. Everything comes up so crisp, and especially that everything's kind of raised up to about 1000 nits, and also with that technology of mini LED and how it works, everything just seems so great with it. On top of this as well, you've got that Pro Motion display built right into it. And to be honest, I haven't really found many apps that actually see that smoothness inside it. I think, to be honest, there was an article that came out recently that talked about, for example, that Safari, what's built into macOS, hasn't even got the support for that adaptive screen right now of using the 0 to 120 Hertz. But you know what's going to happen? There will be updates in the future, and developers also need to jump on the back of their apps to basically update them to make them work with that ProMotion. So right now, I'd say ProMotion is definitely a great feature built into the MacBook Pro, but a lot of apps out there are using it to their advantage yet. But I'd say this time next year, it probably will be. But overall, I would definitely say this display is got to be the best display I've ever seen. Moving on down, looking at the trackpad and the keyboard, there are some big changes here. And you can see straight away, if I compare this to the 13-inch MacBook Pro, the keyboard layout looks very different. We've actually got like a full-on black keyboard everywhere on this MacBook Pro. So we've actually got the actual keys are in black, and then actually the actual frame, what it sits in, is also black at the same time. And to be honest, this does look like the real deal. It does look really cool, and I'm a big fan of it. Now, I know a lot of people don't really like it, but to be honest, I think it's really cool. Another good change what's been seen on the keyboard has got to be with that Touch ID. It's now more like a proper key now in the top corner, and I really love that. And on the opposite end, look how big this escape button is. honest. It's huge. So definitely, if you want to go and escape out of a program, you can definitely do that. So I'm also a big fan of that as well. Now with the 13-inch MacBook Pro, you'll notice you've got the touch bar, and that is now missing on the 14-inch MacBook Pro. And again, I sit on the fence with this. I did like the touch bar, but am I going to miss it? Probably not. The main reason what I used the touch bar for when I was using it like on the 13-inch MacBook Pro was when I was typing, and let's say I got some of my spelling a little bit wrong, it was good that the sort of suggestive text came at the top, like what you get with an iPhone right now. You can actually correct bits and pieces, so that is missing, and I'll be honest, that's probably the main thing I'm going to miss out of the touch bar. For everything else what I used on the touch bar, it was to do with the brightness, the sound, it was to do with the actual keyboard brightness as well. There is nothing really I'm going to miss out, so it's good to have those function keys back on top of the MacBook Pro, and also those keys are really rather large as well. They're not little half-size keys, what you have had on previous MacBooks in the past. So it's good to see that Apple have taken full advantage of this. Onto the trackpad, there isn't that many differences between the 14-inch and the 13-inch MacBook Pro, and to be honest, the actual trackpad is just the right size, and I actually like it staying the same as it has been for the 13-inch MacBook Pro. So yeah, I'm not really fussed that they haven't done any upgrades here. I really like how the touch pad works, and I'm glad it has stayed the same, so all happy there. So moving on to design next with the MacBook Pro, and there has been some changes here, and I'll just show you, I don't know if you can see this, but you can see straight away we've got that new MagSafe free connector, and I have missed this. The MagSafe free connector is being an absolute godsend just to have it back for a week. Already I have tripped over my cables about 2 or 3 times, and it's just popped right back out. It's so good to have this back inside a MacBook Pro. It's also really good to have these 2 USB-C ports as well, and these are now Thunderbolt 4 and also USB 4 ports, and also behind them the actual bus controller are separate for each port. You don't have one shared between 2 ports. So this basically means you can take advantage of the speeds of each port. So whereas before, like on the 13-inch MacBook Pro, the 2 ports actually share the same bus speed. So basically if you completely loaded up one port with all the speed, the other port would slow it right down, and that is not the case on the 14-inch MacBook Pro. It's also good to see that you've got the headphone port here as well. It's in a different place. It's good that they've still got this here. I personally use like AirPods and everything, so I'm not actually really used this port at all since my time having this MacBook Pro, but it's good to have it back, and it's on a different place this year. But if I do flick around my MacBook Pro here, you can also see some other changes again. The good news is we've got a HDMI port back now on the MacBook Pro, and this is something I have missed. Quite a lot of time I've connected up my MacBook Pros to an external monitor, and I've always had to kind of plug in a dongle to do this, and it's been a real pain, to be honest. So it's really good to have this back. Okay, it is HDMI 2.0, so it's not HDMI 2.1, what is the best out there, but it is still really good, and to be honest, for most people's needs, it'll be absolutely fine. You've got another USB-C port here, and again, that runs on its own separate bus again, so you can use the maximize of that Thunderbolt 4 and USB 4 speeds inside that. And then finally, it's good to also get an SD card slot. So for creators like myself, like now, right, making this video, I've got an SD card in my camera, and I can just pop it out and stick it straight into the side here without actually having the need to use a dongle. So it's really, really good to have that. Now, closing down the MacBook Pro, you can actually see some differences here straight away with the actual shape. The actual shape reminds me a lot of the MacBook Pros that existed back in, say, I think it was about 2004 or 2003, I can't remember, with the power kind of Macs that used to exist. And these got upgraded to the Intel MacBook Pros. These were the 15.4-inch MacBook Pros out there, and I think they also did the 17 back in that day. And that design, it kind of really looks like that, to be honest, when the lid is closed. It's really, really cool. For weight-wise, between both of these MacBook Pros, the 13-inch and the 14-inch, you can tell that the 14-inch is slightly heavier. But to be honest, it is bigger and it is a bit more thicker, as you can see. So to be honest, that is completely expected. But on the bottom of the 14-inch MacBook Pro, I'll put my 13 one down there are some cool changes what they've done at the bottom. They've put this stamp in, what I love, into the chassis, what says MacBook Pro. And also these kind of grippers on the bottom for your table are nice and enlarged now, and they're really, really cool. I'll just show you the bottom of the 13-inch MacBook Pro and how that looks. So as you can see, it's completely plain, there's nothing there at all, and then you've just got the 4 little grippers in the corner. So yeah, that is really, really cool to see that. So I am a big fan of the design on the 14-inch MacBook Pro, definitely. So next of all, what have daily tasks been like with the MacBook Pro? Well, as you can expect, they've been completely flawless. So being that we've got the M1 architecture, and that's been out now for around about a year when this review comes out, a lot of companies out there have made either their apps being fully compatible with the Apple Silicon chipset, or they've made them more compatible with Rosetta 2, or Rosetta 2 has got more better with working out x86 kind of apps with Apple Silicon kind of ways of working out there. So the likes of web browsing has been a breeze out there, and also listening to music or watching videos on it has been superb as well. And also for those guys out there who've been wondering about battery life has been very, very good. So to be honest, if I've had the brightness on around about 75 to 80% kind of brightness, and also let's say if I decided to binge watch say Netflix on this MacBook Pro, then I could probably easily get around about 15 to 16 hours out of this machine. Now I know Apple did target and say that you could probably get around about 17 hours, but you know, that is probably at extremely low brightness, sound being loud and so forth. So basically, you know, still getting around about 15 hours of kind of battery life just for simple tasks like that inside this MacBook Pro have been an utter breeze. Now for all those other people out there as well who are wondering what's inside this MacBook Pro and what chipset I picked inside it, well this is actually the 10 core version. So this is the version that Apple mainly talked about at the Apple event. So this has got 2 efficiency cores and also 8 performance cores, and this has suited my needs. Also for GPU cores, if you wanted to know, it's the 16 core GPU. So basically you could argue it's the full pout M1 Pro out there. The only difference is it's only got 16 gigabytes of RAM. And talk about RAM sort of usage, I've managed to open up things like Photoshop, Final Cut Pro, and also had say open say 10 tabs open inside say Chrome, and also have Safari open in the background as well. Don't ask me why I have 2 browsers open, it's very, very complicated. But let's say I have that open and I'm exporting a video in Final Cut Pro. Let's say I'm fiddling around with some photos on Photoshop and grabbing some bits and pieces out of say Chrome and Safari. It's been an absolute breeze. And talk about the breeze, those fans have kicked in when I've started to export some of the videos that I've been doing. But normally those fans don't kick in within like the first sort of 10 seconds or 20 seconds. They do take say about 30 seconds to kick in if I'm doing an export of a video, what could last up to say 5 to 6 minutes of doing an export. And talk about doing a Final Cut Pro export, because that's what I use to do all my video editing. It has been absolutely amazing. Now I come from a person who's been using a 16-inch MacBook Pro, so shrinking down to a 14-inch MacBook Pro has been a little bit more difficult for me, and to be honest I do actually prefer a 16-inch model over a 14-inch, but that is just my own preference. A lot of you guys are happy with a 13-inch or 14-inch MacBook Pro. But for doing the actual exports, it has been amazing to see the differences between, say, a i9 MacBook Pro 16-inch and this 14-inch MacBook Pro with the M1 Pro chipset inside it. When I've been doing, say, a H.264 sort of export, what's kind of the most kind of common exports that a lot of YouTubers out there, including myself, use, it has been much more faster than doing it on my 16-inch MacBook Pro. Plus, also at the same time as well, temperatures have been far lower. Now, I don't have like a thermal gun to check it, but you know, I have been putting my hand underneath my 14-inch MacBook Pro to feel how warm it gets, and it does get warm, but compared to say the 16-inch with the Intel chipset, you know, you could cook bacon on that, or cook, you know, a burger on that instead on the back of it, or even an egg on my MacBook Pro 16-inch with that Intel chipset. You wouldn't be able to do that at all on the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So from that point of view, it has been absolutely amazing. And do check out some of these benchmarks that I did do here. So you can see straight away comparing them to my 16-inch MacBook Pro and also to my 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro, you can see that the 14-inch MacBook Pro generally comes on top on most of the benchmarks. So I am really, really happy with this. A couple of other things to check out here on the MacBook Pro has got to be that webcam, what I spoke about in that notch earlier. Let's go and check that out and see how well that performs. So as you can see, the details of like my face is quite clear for a 1080p camera, so it's really good to get this upgrade. But there isn't like any kind of center stage features. If I move around, you can see the camera's not following me at all. But overall, it's capturing my voice quite nicely as well with a built-in microphone. So I'm quite impressed. It is definitely an upgrade over the 720p camera that we've had on previous MacBook Pros. So for that, it is really, really good. So you can see the quality is quite good, and it's definitely an improvement on the MacBook Pro 13-inch that I have. But what I would also say, it's a shame it's not actually a center stage camera. You know, the cheapest iPad has a center stage camera in it. And you know, the MacBook Pros, the most expensive notebooks that they do now, and they're the newest ones out there, the newest Apple product at this time of making this video, don't even feature center stage. And that's a bit of a letdown in my opinion. I think that is something Apple should have done inside these new MacBook Pros. But in conclusion, for my first week with this 14-inch MacBook Pro with an M1 Pro chipset inside it, have I loved my time with it? Well, the simple answer is yes. This is definitely a step in the right direction with MacBook Pros. Now, Apple back in 2016 or wherever it was when they brought out the last generation MacBook Pros did bring in some sort of revolutionary kind of technologies and new ideas out there, and it was just things that we just didn't need. We didn't need that touch bar. It was a nice idea, but it just didn't kick off the way that Apple wanted it to do. You know, at the end of the day, we're so used to looking at a screen for our shortcuts and bits and pieces like that. Why now introduce a touch bar to do it there? I could see what Apple were thinking, but it just didn't work, like I said, and a lot of other people out there said it just didn't work. So it's really, really good to see that Apple have fixed this. Also, something else that I am very, very happy with this MacBook Pro has got to be the Apple Silicon chipset inside it. The performance is amazing, and it reflects in everything you do on tasks inside this MacBook Pro. If you're coming from any Intel MacBook Pro, you will see a massive difference. Now, I would say though, if you did come from, say, a M1 MacBook Pro 13-inch, or let's say you came from an iMac with that 24-inch display or anything like that with Apple Silicon inside it in kind of a Mac form, there are going to be some apps out there where you're not really going to notice any differences. So for example, I did talk about exporting video. I did actually export a 1080p video on the 14-inch MacBook Pro, and I exported that same video on my 8GB 13-inch MacBook Pro, and to be honest, the export speeds were exactly the same. There wasn't really any differences inside it. So really, if you are going to get yourself the 14-inch MacBook Pro, and that's even with the 8-core, the cheapest option out of the baseline, or even if you pick yourself, say, an M1 Max, make sure you're buying this MacBook Pro for the right reasons. Do not buy it because it looks fancy, and I must admit, it does look fancy, it does look gorgeous. But to be deadly honest, if you're not going to use the potential of all of its power, it's going to be a bit of a waste of money for you, definitely with the 14-inch model. Well guys, it's time to wrap up this video at the same time. So if you have enjoyed watching it, please do press the like button, and at the same time as well, if you want to hear the latest Apple news, reviews and comparisons, please also hit subscribe and that notification bell. Until next time guys, I will see you really soon. Bye bye.